This is Art 154, lecture on rigging, part 1. We have a lamp here, and basically we're going to try to mimic a Pixar lamp, the Luxor Junior animation, which you can search and find online if you want to see it. But what we're going to look at is how to actually make the character. So before we do anything else, we want to go in, and it looks like we already have everything locked. Yeah, the ground plane. You want to make sure that anything besides the character you're creating is hidden or locked. And what we want to do is we'll maximize this viewport, because we're going to do most of our work in here, and I'll hit G to turn off the grid. And what we're going to look at doing is basically combining all these elements. So we've frozen everything or hidden everything besides the lamp. And now what we want to do is we want to start doing what's called grouping. Now we've done grouping before, but if you look at this model, you'll see that there's a lot of extra pieces, like there's a pin, and there's this, and there's that. And if we animate this and hook this all up, we don't have to animate each one of these. So we want to do some grouping of different items to make them work better. Now the base we're going to leave alone. That'll be called the root. But we can grab the little swivel and then hold down the control key and grab the little pin, and then we can group. And I can call this lower swivel, I think I spelled that right, group. And I recommend having the name group somewhere so you know that versus the object, because it lists them together. Now here's the lower arm, and if you look at the lower arm, you'll actually notice that it's two separate objects. So if I just go to click one of them, that's not going to help me, so I have to make sure I select both of them. So make sure that you have your border select set properly, that anything that's crossing in an object, and then I can just border select. Now I know I have both of them. It says two objects selected. Hold down the control key and get that pin, and this will be a group, and we'll call this the lower arm group. And OK. Now we're going to do what I call the elbow. So we're going to grab this piece, we're going to control grab that piece, group, elbow group. And then we got to do the same thing with the upper arm that we do with the lower arm. So we'll border select, grab both of these, two objects, hold on control, select that, group, and now we have upper arm group. Now this we're going to leave alone, the neck, and what we want to do with the head is we want to take everything that's in the head, and we want to make that one all object, because there's no point in changing any of it. So we'll just call this head group, and that's basically contains the basically the switch and the housing and the inside reflector and a bulb and an actual omni light that we can use to illuminate the scene. So we got that grouped. We can set that up, and now the next thing we want to do is, now that we have these groups, like let's look at this one. If I go and I look at where I'm rotating this from, it's from the center. Now that's not going to help, because we actually want to locate these from where the pins are. So what we want to do is we want to go in and relocate each of these, what are called the pivot points. So even this bottom one, ideally we want this bottom one to be at the bottom, because when we have this lamp on the surface, the value and position is going to be based on wherever this pivot is, and if it's at 0, then we know it's on top of the table. So we go into, you'll see over Modify tab, you go to the next one over, and there's pivots, and then you can do Effect Pivot Only. Now the only thing you want to do is use the Move tool. Don't use Rotate, because you'll change the orientation and get all kind of crazy things. So we'll take this and move this down, and if you want to be precise, you can turn on snapping. But now we have that repositioned. For this pivot, technically it would be where this meets, because this is going to swivel around in a circle. For this group, I got to zoom out a little to move it. We're going to bring it down, and this should be centered on top of this swivel, so it looks realistic. And then we'll go up and do the same thing with the elbow. Bring that down and get that lined up. And then we'll come up here, and this one needs to come down here. Let me make sure I got everything right. Yeah. And then the neck is actually already over here. This will be how I modeled it. So that goes there, and then the head will go where it meets the neck. Okay, so now we're done with that. We turn that on. And now what I always recommend doing is going into testing. So with this piece, if I go to rotate and turn it, you can see it's going up and down at that point. Now I just do Control Z to undo, so I'd recommend you do the same. Now this one, if I go to rotate, you'll see it's off. It's actually accurate if I go to move, but it's a bug. So if you do effect pivot only and then you turn it off, sometimes see it'll pop. So it's just one of those things. It's a 3D Max bug. They've had it for decades at this point, or years. So it's just something you just have to kind of accept. But you can see I'm going through it, I'm checking everything, and everything looks fine. So next thing I need to do is actually group these and combine them. So now if we group them, we can't pivot the individual elements, and we can't move it, but we want to hook all this up together. This is called parenting, and what we're going to do is we're going to make the foot, or the base, that's going to be the root, which is the master parent, and everything else is going to get influenced by that. These will all be the children. And it's probably easier just to demonstrate than actually do it any other way. So if we grab the swivel, and we go, and here are your tools for select and link. They call it link. It's an older terminology, 3D Max specific. If you tell people linking, they might not know what you're talking about. Parenting is the industry standard term. So we activate that, and then we get pick whip, and we go over it. Now watch, when I hit it, okay, I don't get any feedback, but at this point, if I go to move the base, and I move it up and down, you can see that that moves along with it. But if I go to select this, it doesn't do anything. So the idea is now it's a dynamic group, if you will. Now with this one, we'll do the same thing. We'll do select, and we'll drag, and we want this to be assigned to the pivot. So let's go in, and now the pivot, the way we're going to animate that is we're going to have it rotate. So let's see. So yeah, now you can see that that's rotating back and forth, so that works. Now you can use the pick whip for everything. The other way to do it, which some people prefer, is to go in and use what's called a schematic view. And let me just maximize this so you can see it best. And you can see that we have our groups, and each group is green. And then we have an actual hierarchy that's created, and you can see there's little arrows pointing to the children. So what I can actually do is I can grab these. Now the location doesn't make a difference. I'm just moving these just so you can visually see what's happening. So technically the lower arm is below the swivel, and then the elbow group is below that, and then the upper arm is below that. And this is just positional and head group, and you can do it, you can invert it as well. And then there's the stem, which is basically the neck. So there's the linking icon again as well, so you can highlight elbow group, grab connect, now they call it connect, and that is supposed to be the child lower arm. So now you can see that's connecting. Go upper arm, drag that to the elbow group, stem, drag that to the upper arm, and head group, grab that to the stem. And if for some reason something's off, you highlight, and if you hit the unlink, you can also break apart the groups as well using this technique. The other reason that people use this is you're going to have a lot of objects, and we're going to use a couple techniques to make it easier, but you can actually use this as a tool to select any of the elements in your scene. So people use that when they do character animation because they're so complicated in how they're set up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to limit the rotations of these items, and let's start now the base, or the root, that you don't limit anything because we want to be able to scale it, we want to be able to rotate and move it, because that's the main thing. If we scale it, we can have a baby lamp. If we move it, we want it to hop around, rotate, etc. So what we want to do is if we select the next one, the only thing that this should do is rotate on this axis. Now right now it's showing up the Y, but if you look, the rotation is based on the view coordinates. If we do local, and we go to rotate, you'll see that it's actually based on Z. So if we go to link info, you see we can actually lock stuff. So we don't want this to be moved at all, or we don't want it to be scaled. The only thing we want to be able to do is rotate on Z. And now you see everything else is grayed out, and this is nice because then you don't do accidentally select something. If we go up and grab this one, we have it set to local. We rotate that back and forth, and now you can see that that's actually on X. So we turn off all these moves, turn off scale, then turn off X. And now we're going to do the same thing with the elbow, because it's on the same plane, movement plane. So you can see that that's limited now. And we'll go and we'll take this one, and that one will be on X as well. And then the neck, I think, is the same thing. Yep. Okay, now the final one, the lamp itself, what we want to do is we want it to pivot this way so that you can see that that's on Y. Rotate, so we want to move this all off, move this all off, and do Y rotate. And set it up. And at this point, we have a basic rig that we can actually start to keyframe and move around. So this is the most basic rig that you can set up and utilize. And I'll show you some other steps that you can do, but this is just, if you get to this point, you're doing good, and you can actually start to literally just use auto key to animate these different parts and move them around. Now, if we go to animate, the big thing that's going to happen is if we go into the curve editor and we look at everything, right now let's do the filtering. We'll change this. So view filter, and right now it's only showing selected objects. If we turn that off, and then we change it to visible objects and hit OK, now if you look, you see it selects everything. And what we want to do is, you can see that this gets really complicated really quick, and we want to have a little bit more control over this. And we know that we're only doing certain channels for different things. So the base, we know we want everything for the base. So the interesting thing you can do is I can highlight something like position, and then I can do view filter, and I can do selected track and hit OK, and now that's the only thing that shows up. So filtering is a really powerful way that you can grab everything. Just remember, you turn everything off, hit OK, and then I'd want to do all transformations for the base, because I want everything for the base. And then you have to go down the control key, and now remember that the box opens and closes the group, and the little circle does the little individual or swivel group. That was a swivel on Z, so we got that added. And then the lower arm group, remember these are all on X now, so that's on X. And this takes a minute, but it makes your life a lot easier. This elbow group is on X as well. And then the upper arm group is on rotation X. And the stem is on rotation X. And then the head group, remember, that's on rotation Y. And now if I go back to view and do filter, and I say just my selected tracks, okay, that's a lot easier to animate than trying to do anything else, and it just makes your life really easy. So I'd recommend doing that before you do anything else, just to be aware of it. So that's called filtering, and that's found under view Q. If you have an older version of Max, if you hit the Q key, it'll pull it up. It's actually located somewhere on a slightly different tab. Okay, so we're going to add a slider, and what a slider does is it'll give us a visual representation of values that we can use to animate with, and we're going to do it for the light. So we go create, this is called a helper, and manipulators, and slider, and then you just click it in space. Now the thing that's a little weird is if I go to move this, I can't do anything to it, and it's because you have to use what I call the jack, which is a special mode. And if you're in jack mode, you can move it around. You can hold down left mouse button and drag it, you can hide it, and then you can animate it as well. So you need to have the jack on, if not, it's just an object that's there. And we can call this lamp light slider. And we can go in and there's some different parameters, so we can call it lamp light slider. And let's see what happens with this. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to select the lamp. Now there's no way to select the lamp based on that, but if I go back to the schematic view we have, let's go, there's our manipulator. Let's see if we can highlight it. Okay, so let's try it another way. Okay, so now we have to get this to actually change the multiplier value of the light. So what we need to do is we go into Animation, Wire Parameters, Parameter Wire Dialog. And what this is you're going to connect the one to the other. So there's a lot of stuff here, but remember we're just looking for the objects at the bottom. So we don't need that. And there's our slider. And in the object section, not the transform section, there is a value, and that is the value for the animation, or the actual slider moving back and forth. Now on this side, we gotta completely open this up and continue on going. Open up elbow group. Why are we missing? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's the Omni, and I'm opening it up, and what I want to do is the multiplier. So you can see the value of the slider is changing the multiplier of the object. And the control direction we want is whatever this slider value is going to change the multiplier. So we hit this arrow. Don't hit two-way because you get some errors. And then you hit connect. And now if I go into perspective view and let's grab the slider, now we have to hit the jack. If we animate it, we should be getting the light to work. Oh, it's showing us the default scene light controls, illuminated, realistic. Okay, the error I was having had to do with the preview mode. Right now this is set to shaded. If I go to move it, I don't have anything. In older versions, shaded would be fine. But in newer versions of Max, you have to do different. You're going to change it to realistic. And now it has the default light. And now we got to change this to light and shadows and change it to illuminate with scene lights. And now you can see everything changes. We have the jack selected. And now if I grab this, you can see I can animate the light. Now this is pretty extreme, the value. So you can go in and you can make different adjustments as far as how big it is, what it looks like, etc. So there's a lot of changes you can do, but just to show you the basic of using the slider. And then you just basically select the slider, and as long as auto key is on, it'll add a key to the actual value of the slider. Now the other way to do this is to basically add custom parameters. So rather than having to select each part and animate it, you just select the base and that's it. Now we're going to add these custom parameters to the base bottom, which is our root, and we'll go back to animation and we're going to do a parameter editor, and what it's going to do is it's going to ask us to create a new parameter, and we'll call this swivel, and we'll just hit add, and you'll see the instant we do that, now we get a custom attribute. I'll do another one real quick, lower arm, add that one, and then let's do one more, elbow, and add. So at this point nothing's hooked up, but remember we go back to our wiring parameter. So we'll go animation, wire parameter, wire dialog, and on the left hand side we want to open the base and object, and if we go all the ways down there's a folder called custom attributes, and then you see swivel. Now on the right side we go and we grab the lower swivel group, and you remember it rotates on Z, and we connect this to this, and then we go connect, and when we do this, hopefully this one, yeah, you can see it spins. Now it spins a lot each time it gets a number that's increasing, and also you can't do any negatives. So the two things I recommend is I take the swivel, and you can do something like divide it by 360, and now you update each value, and you can see it's really slow, it's actually a degree. So that might be too much. You might want to do something like 36, update, and now go in, and you can see now you have a little bit more control, but it still only goes in one direction. So what we need to do is we need to go back to the parameter editor, and you can basically edit as long as you have the object selected. You have to make sure the object is selected. If you don't have anything selected, you're not going to be able to edit. So we go back, select this, and we go edit, and it brings a list of all our parameters, and you can change the order. And what we want to do is when this is selected, you'll see the value changes. So whatever we have highlighted shows over here, and right now the range is from 0 to 100. Let's do 360 and, oh wait, negative 360 and positive 360. And then if we do apply changes, now if we go to swivel, you can see we can do negative and positive as well. And what you do is you basically go through and do that with everything. So those are the basic setups for lamps, and if you want to animate these, once again, if you have auto key on and you change the value, you'll see that this turns red. And once this turns red, it means that it's keyed. We'll drag it to another spot and do it. Now you can see that's red, and if we go to animate, we're actually animating it using that. So this is really easy. You basically add everything, including the lamp, to this list, and then you're good to go. And that's it.